Hi. I'm here to refute the claim that first-year students at Cal Poly Pomona should be able to choose whether or not they want to live on campus for the first year. Now, my opponents presented three secondary claims. That one, fees required in order to live on campus are expensive. That number two, on-campus living could offer many inconveniences for many lifestyles. And the third one is that insufficient amount of dormitories for all incoming freshman students. Now, I found many inconsistencies with the first and the third claim, and that while I generally agree with this position, I felt that claim number two had needed some more additional evidence. For the first claim, he noted that fees required in order to live on campus are expensive. He first states that students must pay for dormitory fees on top of the increasing tuition. And what I found is that if you're a freshman student, you can opt to not live in the dorm if you live in the local area. What I found was that the local area is bordered roughly by the 605 freeway on the west side and the 15 freeway on the east side. That's roughly 30 minutes in both directions. And I also found that past those points, for example, I live in Arcadia, which is slightly more left to the 605. And I have friends in that school who go to Cal Poly Pomona, and they simply fill out an exemption form to not go here. So past that radius, you have around 30 to 35 minutes where you can choose to not live on campus, and past that point, it's questionable whether or not you would want to commute at 45 minutes or longer distances. And secondly, he noted for that particular portion that college tuition is increasing, and that because on-campus living is mandatory, that there are no signs of financial aid being adjusted to help fund for the consistently building costs. So I went to the Cal Poly Pomona webpage, and I listed directly from their information that eligible students will receive a financial aid award reflecting the additional costs of living on campus. Financial aid awards will be made available in April to assist students with their decision-making process prior to the May 1st, 2010 enrollment confirmation deadline. So essentially what this is stating is that if you're eligible, that if you need financial assistance, that they will give you the extra money in order to be able to live on campus. Now I want to move on to his second point, that on-campus living could offer many inconveniences for many lifestyles. His first point was that students with a more specific requirement for food could not be accommodated with regular campus food and would be more convenient to be home. I noted a lack of evidence and detail in this claim. One of them is that Cal Poly Pomona campus food is more geared for those who would need to go somewhere to go around fast. There's not very many places where you can just sit down and eat. And there's many fast food places here, College Junior, Taco Bell, Subway. And one problem is that on Monday to Thursdays, these places close at earlier around 6. And there's only two options that are open at 8, which is Find Express and Round Table. And on Friday, everything closes at 3. And on Saturday and Sunday, there's nothing open, except for Denny's, which is your only option, in addition to Los Olivos Commons. But the problem is that if you need additional options, Los Olivos only has strict times when you can eat, so it's not always an option. I looked at other campuses like UC Irvine, for example, and they have, for example, next door they have a strip mall like restaurants, Shop for Tea, Veggie Grill, Chakra, Trader Joe's, In-N-Out, movie theaters, and these places usually are open 7 days the entire week, and they usually close between 10 p.m. to 1 a.m., which gives a lot more flexibility and options. And his second point is that if you stay on campus, it could refrain students from seeking part-time employment due to unfamiliar territory. What I found was that when I went on Google Maps and I tried to find local businesses around this particular area, I noticed that you pretty much need a car in order to work around this area. if you go west, there's Mount Stack, and before Mount Stack, there's this huge hilly area. But past that, you need to go around 3 to 5 miles in order to find any local businesses. On the north, you have a freeway, and there's nothing there. On the right side, you have a residential community. On the right side, you have a residential community, and you need another 3 to 5 miles to work there. And if you go south, you have Valley Boulevard, and you have local businesses there, but you need to go another 5 miles. So what I'm finding here is that you need to travel at least 5 miles, and you need a car in order to work around these local areas. Now, the third point that he made was that there were an insufficient amount of dormitories for all incoming freshmen and first-year transfer students. And one of the first points he made was that students are required to live in the suites, which means that there's more funds to be paid. And what I found was that when I looked in the email particularly and through the website, I found that the students were never required to live in the suite. It was just an option if you wanted to live in the suite or not. And I live in a suite, and I asked many people why they moved to the suite, and a majority of them simply responded that they didn't like the living conditions of the dorm. So I just want to conclude that while I agree with his position, I felt that he was missing a notable amount of evidence and inconsistencies in his claims. Thank you.
All right, a similar kind of problem. The client's guilty, but here's a better argument against it. I think you're running into this idea that you're doing an assessment rather than a refutation. There are a few places where you did have some refutation argument, and I thought that those were the strongest part of the argument, where in essence on the first point, for instance, you suggested that the notion that students are going to be required to live on campus ignores substantial variations from that rule. For instance, that the areas are roughly the 605 to the 15 freeway, or 30 minutes in any direction. So the likelihood that somebody's going to be in a situation where they want to commute in those long distances, I thought you had a good press on that, and that's a good piece of information there. Also, the notion that they're exemption forms, so if they're exempted from the rule, I don't know what you have to do to get the exemption, but if anybody can get an exemption, then I'm not exactly sure that it's a rule. So I thought you had a good press on that. After that, like I said, it seems like there are just a couple of places where there's a conflict, and the rest of the time you are actually presenting a better argument. For instance, on the financial assistance argument, I thought that you did have a good response there, that the advocate didn't recognize that on the website it does say adjustments will be made in financial aid for housing issues, so it would be considered there. That's a direct conflict with the advocate's point. Everything on the food issue, basically you're giving a better argument for the food issue than the advocate did. All the restrictions on the different kinds of foods that are available and the hours and how problematic it is in comparison to other places. I think that suggests why we in fact shouldn't be requiring students to live on campus, which is the position that the advocate's taking. So I'm not exactly sure how that contrasts very well to those positions. I thought that you had an okay point about the suites versus the dorm. It's just we're running into the same problem here. You don't want to say, I agree with the point, but let me make a couple of points here. I don't care whether you agree with the point or not. What's the problem with the argument that the advocate presented? What contradictory issues are there? Those are the things that you ought to be looking for. You found a couple of them, and I thought you did a good job on those, but then you undermine it by simply suggesting, like I said, an assessment rather than a refutation. All right, thank you.